Welcome,
y'all
everybody.
ready to do this thing?
Okay, I was going to do the intro, but you're so hype now. You're so hype.
That's our new intro. Y'all ready to do this thing?
Why do we have an intro? We've never had an intro.
Well, we have an outro.
We have a different outro every single week, let's be honest.
That's right.
We have themes and styles, but we're not the same thing every week. I'm very happy with that.
And isn't that our brand?
That is indeed
our brand?
Starting in the middle of a conversation and ending in the middle of a conversation. We are the Sopranos of PWTorch. Welcome, everybody, to the PWTorch VIP section. You are listening to Nick and Tom's Intercontinental Adventure, and today we are going to be heavily focused on WWE's Hell in a Cell 2022 pay-per-view, which is right around the corner. For some reason, this one is not on a Saturday and is on a Sunday instead. One of the very few this year to actually take place on a Sunday. There are 7 matches planned, only one of which is from Smackdown. We're going to run through them all. You'll get the opinions of myself, Tom Colohue, one of your hosts here, and of course, the other host who joins me, Nick Barbati. Nick, are you excited for the Hell in a Cell card?
I am, and you know what I would say to this? Y'all ready to do this thing?
Okay, so that took all of 20 seconds to become very annoying.
I think it's. I'm already annoyed by it too, to be frank with you. But yeah, I think you know how the show ends. I'm actually really looking forward to this card. It's hard this time of year because things seem with SummerSlam being early and WrestleMania feeling, at least whether it was or not, of feeling a little later. I feel like between Hell in a Cell and then we know that Money in the Bank will be coming shortly thereafter, and then SummerSlam on its heels, then the Clash at the Castle coming. There's a bit of a convergence of major shows that are going to, create a different type of energy heading into some of these shows. Tom, I am looking forward to this show, and hopefully WWE makes a choice heading into the booking of these subsequent major shows in that you can highlight different feuds each time and really use it as a point of elevating certain feuds and certain individuals. This show, what I'm really most excited about is that this is not a Hell in a Cell where we have 3 or 4 Hell in a Cell matches, or quite frankly, even 2. I mean, this is about Cody versus Seth, which is a feud that I didn't feel needed to be extended any longer, even to 2 matches. But once we were there, well, sure, why not throw another chair on a cruise ship? Let's get to 3. But now it feels right, and it feels like it's an effort to actually emphasize that feud and the individuals. I think how it ends is going to be very interesting, and I hope WWE has a cool plan for how to wrap this thing up. But the rest of the card, I think overall is strong, and I think hopefully WWE also takes this as an emphasis of the ability, I should say, to keep these at 3 hours, even if maybe 15 minutes extra, but that's about it. Keeping these cards tight, and if they're going to be happening at a frequency in which we're seeing, using it as an opportunity not to tire out your audience, because it's one thing to have a super long show, it's another thing to have a super long show every 3 weeks.
Completely agree with that. A 3-hour pay-per-view is absolutely fantastic in terms of quality, and usually we get enough quality wrestling to go. I know there was a lot of malaise about the length of the AEW pay-per-view recently, for example. WWE, while we're lacking a little bit on the SmackDown side, and certainly that's something we looked at last week, we are still getting a quality show, I feel, when I look at this overall as a package. There is a lot of variation here in the different style of matches. And while we do have some repetition in the feuds that we're seeing, and a lot of people who are in repeat matches, they find ways to make it at least somewhat more interesting, adding the Cell, for example, to Cody versus Seth. I also find it somewhat interesting that Seth Rollins is having something of a formula written at the moment. This is very similar to his feud with Edge, I feel, where I also felt we don't need another match. And then from what I can tell, I didn't watch it personally because it was in Saudi Arabia, their Hell in a Cell match was apparently fantastic. Apparently absolutely great. So this may be the cherry on top, as it were, to what has been overall an okay feud. And I enjoy Seth's work. I think it's really helped to establish Cody at the top of the card, where he undoubtedly and the WWE feel he belongs, and certainly where a lot of fans feel he belongs. And it's if you've never watched AEW, Stardust just walked back into WrestleMania and beat Seth Rollins. You needed the context. You needed more time. And they've absolutely given us that. On top of that, we get some very interesting championship matches. Bianca Belair feuding against the top of the division in many ways. Austin Theory with his first major championship challenger, and it's a challenger we weren't really expecting, but who good things can come from. And we have what's going on with Judgment Day in the club, which has genuinely become one of my favourite storylines at the moment. Hell in a Cell is genuinely a stacked card, and I'm looking forward to watching it, to be completely honest. So let's jump straight in and talk about our first match, which is going to be our Smackdown match. It is a rematch from WrestleMania from WrestleMania Backlash. And that is Madcap Moss, a reinvigorated and reinvented Madcap Moss, based on what happened on SmackDown, looking a bit more like Goldberg in many ways, versus Happy Corbin in a no-holds-barred match. This got personal quickly, and it looks like it's going to get slightly more personal before the evening is out. Who do you have winning this one?
Well, this is a complete reinvention of Madcap Moss. And so at this point, there's clearly an investment being placed on him. Tom, he was always physically much bigger than the presentation would have allowed you to believe he was. So we were always going to land in this position where Vince fell in love with him, right? He fits aesthetically exactly how you would want a WWE superstar to look if you're Vince McMahon. There is a lot there that worked in terms of his comedy that he brought to the table. But at some point, that comedy needed to be stripped back. And quite frankly, you know how I feel about suspenders and things like that. I actually think they're dangerous in the ring. So I'm glad those seem to be gone. There's also a real danger in him stripping too much of his personality away. So you don't want to lose the touches of charm, which is really what got him as a connecting point to the audience. It was charm. It wasn't necessarily the jokes and everything. It was his ability to smile. And so you want to make sure that still exists. There is no scenario here where I think it is okay for his character to lose. And this needs to not be a continued in the line of the formula that you, as to use your word, that some of these wrestlers have, where the Baron Corbin feuds go on forever and ever. This needs to be a definitive end. And, when we talk about rising babyface wrestlers in WWE, I've been pretty consistent that I think Madcap is someone who should be on their radar. And I think last night was the first major flirt with the idea of, oh, this could really be someone. I don't know how I love about the plain black trunks thing, but I do think at some point, the hair could use a little bit of a trim to make him have a more of a serious vibe to him and to get him out of that direct comparison to maybe like a Drew McIntyre. But with that said, overall, as a performer, I think Madcap has all that it takes to go to that next level if getting started off on the right foot. Right foot would be here, a definitive, strong win, but also you have to have that crack of warmth to his character. This is not Goldberg 2.0, and he's not the right person to be Goldberg 2.0. And quite frankly, in this era, as we know, Goldberg ain't working right now. So let's get Madcap with a nice balance between his previous character and this forward movement that they're adding in right now. And I think we're off to the races. And good on him. I thought last night was good enough of a start, but again, could use some tweaking.
I know you've been on the Madcap train for a while, and I personally wasn't. I didn't really see it. This, for me, is a step in the right direction, but I worry it does sort of push back against the fact that he was over, and he is over as that character that he was. Because of that, this does hurt it slightly, but you do have to strike that balance. I think they did go slightly too far in that regard. The promo was a bit too serious. I feel he should have celebrated a little bit after beating up Baron Corbin. But that moment was robbed, essentially, in the fact that he did lose. And they clearly wanted him to show that he was disappointed to lose the match, rather than just excited to beat someone up. I think that's a shame. Just let him be excited to beat someone up. I'd be happy with that. Crack a joke afterwards while Baron Corbin is stumbling down the ramp. There are ways to balance it, and hopefully this was just 1 week of over-serious, and then we move towards it. The Drew McIntyre comparison, physically, it's there. It's very much there with the long hair at the moment, and I enjoyed you making that reference. That said, with the added seriousness, you can see just how built this guy is. I wouldn't be angry seeing this guy stepping into a ring with Brock Lesnar.
Right.
There is a fit there now, where you know how Brock likes working with the smaller guys, but the only guys who are actually a risk to him are the bigger guys. Madcap looks like a bit of a risk to him. He really does. I'm happy with this. I think Baron Corbin's going to be losing. And I think Corbin should be losing at this stage of his career to this level of competitor. I think Moss has got a decent future ahead of him, certainly. I'd like to see how far he can go. And I think you're absolutely right that Corbin's formula is really simple. He's the star maker heel, but he's not the star. So right before you get to the very top, you have to go through Baron Corbin and go through Baron Corbin and go through Baron Corbin again. And there's still Baron Corbin. He's been the gatekeeper basically since he became the sheriff of Raw in 2017, and he still kind of has that element to him. The Shinsuke Nakamura face turn came because of Baron Corbin, and so on and so forth. The big transformations come as a result of Baron Corbin at the moment. Even Finn Balor had that moment with Baron Corbin many years back. It's one of those situations where Baron Corbin is undefined in what he is, but he's very defined as to what the other people he's facing are, or what they become after taking him on. Personally, I would like to see Corbin move up the ladder towards championships at some point soon, even if he's going towards Intercontinental. I think the guy's done great work for a long time, but right now, he's in the perfect spot to give a little back.
Yeah.
The next match I want to talk about is Kevin Owens versus Ezekiel. Now, this feud is entirely based on a little bit of misconception by Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens seems to have an issue with Ezekiel's brother Elias, and this is causing some tension. Ezekiel's just debuted after WrestleMania. Interesting character overall, not much designated personality. He's a bit too defined by Elias at this point, I feel. And I'd like to see some actual personality traits from Ezekiel himself, as it were, because they're supposed to be two clearly defined characters. But Kevin Owens is Kevin Owens, and I feel he's going to be a little further down the ladder for a while now, because ultimately he did main event night one of WrestleMania against Steve Austin. You got to pay that favor back a little bit. So for me, I think Kevin Owens loses here. What do you think?
Well, I have a problem with that, Tom. And it's really how you view the forward movement of the Ezekiel character. You said it's tied too much to the Elias, or currently tied a lot to the Elias character. Well, I don't think you run from that. What I would love is if we entered into Mick Foley Mankind territory, where there's the split personality thing begins to show, and that crack, that first fissure, is seen by a loss to Kevin Owens. I don't know. First of all, I really don't like what you just said there in terms of Kevin Owens feeling that he has to pay something back there. I think Kevin Owens needs to be protected a bit. Now, I understand what you're saying is you're talking about the sensibility of how WWE does the bookings. I get that, but that's just so flawed. I mean, he is if there was ever a time after having a main event WrestleMania against Steve Austin, you protect him afterwards so that moment mattered. And there's never that commitment to really protecting the memories. Now you could just make him any average wrestler on the roster because he can move up and down the card. That is so flawed. Kevin Owens should be that steamrolling Big Van Vader style heel moving forward, so that the next time he has another time where the bully gets pushed on his ass, it matters. So to me, how I would like to see this play out is Kevin Owens, through a tough match or whatnot, does get the win, tries getting the Ezekiel to, admit that he's Elias, and then you see a little bit of a break in the eye that you say, oh, this man's a little crazier than we thought. And there's a story development here. Because here's the thing, they're not moving away from the Elias of it all. So it's going to have to come into play at some point where there's either a split personality or there's, where we get to the point where we're going to have a tag team match and you're waiting for the one, there's a what here, what's going to happen. So I just don't think it needs to come at the expense of Kevin Owens losing. He can come out being humiliated. He can come out being fooled, all that kind of stuff, but he should still win. You don't have to give up everything and all of the goodwill that he's built on his name just for that moment. So I still think Kevin Owens should and will win.
Just as an aside on this, I'm really enjoying as you've said there, the Elias of it all. I'm really enjoying that. It's actually something quite different and quite unique, really, when it comes to the overall characterization that you get in WWE. The fact that they're not hiding from it, they're taking the mick out of themselves a little bit. They're poking fun at themselves and the way that they reinvent characters and all that. And eventually this is all going to come to a head because they're using his past, as it were, to make sure this character does get over. And I would love something silly like that, where it's, okay, it's going to be a tag team match. Elias is going to help me. I would absolutely love that. That's a great idea. And I just think little things like that can go a really long way. And there's no reason not to. There's absolutely no reason not to do something like that because there are no other storylines in wrestling which is anything like that at this point in time. So by all means, keep that going for a while. That said, I don't want this feud to keep going for a while.
Right.
Because the longer this feud goes, the more it's going to define down Kevin Owens. I'd like Kevin Owens to get a couple more matches against Cody Rhodes. I'd like that. I'd like that elevation. I'd like Kevin Owens to be working against someone like Bobby Lashley.
Mm-hmm.
But at the moment, since WrestleMania, there has been a real focus on talent elevation. This is a good thing, but it can't all be done at once. So we've got the Madcap Moss situation, someone from lower down the card being elevated. Until WrestleMania, we had Rick Boogs being elevated by association to Shinsuke Nakamura. SmackDown's actually been really good at this. Butch, for example, same thing. Someone lower down the card being elevated. Butch actually got a win last night, which is rare for the entirety of Fight Night, who are not called Fight Night, but I will continue to call them Fight Night. It's just a more cool name in my eyes. And then on the Raw side, you've got Omos with the build that he's having, and you've got Ezekiel at the moment. They are the ones from lower down the card who, a year ago, weren't big names. Weren't big names at all. Omos was already a tag team champion, but they weren't big names. And they've been elevated very well over the last year or so, or in Ezekiel's case, quite recently. But I do feel there are a few too many of them at once, and the feuds are starting to go a little bit too long, because the longer they go, the more stuck in the narrow lane you get. And the more you feel like the time between WrestleMania and SummerSlam doesn't matter.
Right.
The more it feels like that. Looking back at this in, say, a year or so, I feel like we'll probably be skipping straight from WrestleMania to Money in the Bank as terms of importance.
Yeah.
That's the feeling I get at times with the amount of rematches we're getting.
So, Tom, would you say that you learned from Jerry that it's all about timing?
I may have known that already, but as we know, Jerry's an important guy in our overall narrative.
Can we get Jerry on the show? We need Jerry on the show.
Oh, you bring Jerry on the show, I'm going to kick off. It's going to be hilarious.
No, Jerry, I'm telling you, I watched Jerry go up to this guy. And Jerry was out of his mind. He goes up to the guy. You know what he says to the guy? Where are you? And the guy turns to him and says, I'm right here. And Jerry walks away. That's Jerry.
That's the high quality wrestling punditry you need from PWTorch. Yep. Get him on the show, sure.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll talk to him.
Next up, Judgment Day, that being Edge, Rhea Ripley, and Damian Priest, taking on AJ Styles, Finn Balor, and Liv Morgan in a 6-person mixed tag match. This is a very exciting match for me. I'm really quite excited by this concept. This is perfect for me of how the rematch element should go. We started off at WrestleMania as Edge versus AJ Styles. At WrestleMania, we added Damian Priest. We then added Finn Balor. We then added Rhea Ripley. We then added Liv Morgan. It's been a constant evolution and an elevation of these individuals. Damian Priest is benefiting well from this. I wouldn't say he's benefiting massively compared to where he was. He was in a pretty good position to start with. Rhea Ripley benefiting very well. She was in the tag division, was doing pretty well, was a tag champion, was a Raw champion, was still benefiting though. Liv Morgan for me benefits the most, but I think all three of those are being elevated. Also, Finn Balor is being normalized a little bit more at this level instead of lower down. This is good for everyone involved. I feel that Edge and AJ Styles are giving back in a much more compelling way than they were with Seth, with Omos. I just really like that we're getting this match, which should be incredibly exciting and incredibly fun. Who do you have winning it?
Well, first of all, let me just say, for the first time this week, it started to connect for me. Who's turning, Tom? Someone's turning.
I don't believe anyone is turning yet.
Okay. we're getting to where Finn Balor turns, because here's where we're going. When you say there's a normalization of Finn Balor, that's with intention. This is a reintroduction long-term of the Demon character, and the Demon ain't singing happy birthday to you when he comes back. So I truly believe that, again, as I talked about last week, we need to get to a point where there's layers within Judgment Day of style of wrestler. And I think that only benefits everybody, right? To just have a little bit of diversity within the actual style of the group. I think that would have really benefited from it. I got to tell you that looking at the show this week, I was like, man, Liv Morgan would have been really good in this role too. Hey, and who's to say there only needs to be one woman, for the record? But if we are headed to a heel Finn Balor versus AJ Styles feud, I mean, wouldn't that be spectacular? Because this is almost like the club is almost like the dream that we all wanted that we know we're not going to get. Like, this isn't going to be some long-term alliance. Like, this isn't when you watch your favorite show and the couple finally gets together, but you know it's just for like 1 or 2 episodes, because then it gives up the plot. You can't have what you want. That's where I think we're at here. I think Judgment Day needs to win. I think to continue to put heat on them, and I think they will win. And I also don't think this is going to be the last you see of them tonight.
Interesting. Okay.
Who do you have?
Well, firstly, I just want to talk about the comparison you've made to the will they, won't they on TV shows. It amazes me how often they finally get to they will, and then they have no idea what to do.
Isn't that so true?
It amazes me how often that is. I remember watching the US version of The Office and just being really happy they finally nailed a will they, won't they, where they did, and they kept making TV shows. Who I think is going to win this is actually the good guys. I think AJ Styles, Finn Balor, and Liv Morgan are going to win this. As I say, I don't think the turn comes yet. I think we are going to get Finn Balor versus AJ Styles at SummerSlam. I think that's a SummerSlam match. I think Judgment Day will then move on to other things. And I think how we get there is the fact that we've got a 6-person tag now. I think Liv Morgan pins Rhea Ripley.
Okay.
Winning the match for the good guys, as it were. I don't think Liv Morgan's actually a long-term part of this, to be completely blunt.
That makes sense.
I think next month, Money in the Bank, both Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley will be in the Money in the Bank ladder match, or at least somewhat involved. There's plenty of people who could be involved in that match from the Raw side. Basically no one on the SmackDown side, let's be honest, when it comes to star power. But I think Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley will be needed elsewhere. If they're not in the match, they'll have their own individual match. So we'll get a standard tag team match. Edge and Damian Priest versus Finn Balor and AJ Styles. At which point Finn Balor makes the turn. We get the Demon King returning at SummerSlam, which is the eponymous home of the Demon King.
That's true.
The Demon King has always been related to SummerSlam, in which he defeats AJ Styles again. After all, last time these two competed was at a Money in the Bank, where the Demon King defeated AJ Styles in an impromptu match that was supposed to be Finn Balor versus Bray Wyatt. That was a few Money in the Banks back. So I feel there's a certain symmetry to that. The turn at Money in the Bank, the Demon King returning at SummerSlam. That's how I feel it would play out. I feel a win for the good guys here would be for Liv Morgan rather than for Finn Balor and AJ Styles. I don't necessarily want Judgment Day to be picking up the loss, as it were, but I do think it's more about Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley at the moment than it is about Finn and AJ.
Well, yeah, that to the scenario I will propose later in the show, that could still work if that's how they choose to end it.
Fair enough. We'll go into our next match, which is a handicap match. Bobby Lashley taking on Omos and MVP. Now, the Bobby Lashley-Omos feud they've tried to make it unique in different ways. You've got arm wrestling, you've got all that jazz, you've got MVP talking it up, but ultimately this one for me is the one I'm least excited to watch. It's just not overall that exciting for me. I'm a Bobby Lashley fan. I'd like to see him elsewhere, but at the same time, as I've discussed, this is a time to elevate people, and they have definitely elevated Omos by doing this. I believe that the heels win here, and that MVP will pin Bobby Lashley. I don't think he'll finish him, but I think he will pin Bobby Lashley. Your thoughts, Nick?
Oh, girl. This is not one I'm looking forward to. You know, you say that it has elevated Omos, and I mean, I don't know that it's an elevation so much as it's just a positive surprise that it hasn't broken yet. I just don't see this, Tom. I can't see Omos in the ring with anybody else for a long period of time. Like, I don't see him in an established feud. I don't. So yeah, do I see a scenario where he and MVP win using exactly as you said, like MVP kneeling down with like one finger on Lashley? Like, sure. But at some point, where's the protection again of Bobby Lashley? Like, you don't have to like have someone help elevate someone at their full expense. You know, at some point, Lashley needs to be protected, especially as we're talking about long-term opponents for Reigns. And just to have people at the very top of the Raw card, I'm going to go, I'm just going to say, I just can't bring myself to say Lashley's going to lose. So I'm going to go with Bobby Lashley. And I hope it is at the, I know that he's not pinning Omos, I feel like, at this point, but fine, we'll have him pin MVP, which would devastate me too. But more than anything, what a waste of MVP right now. I mean, just please, I can think of 10 other people that I would love to see MVP work with, because what's interesting about him is he really is like an old school 80s manager that could float between so many different acts. He doesn't literally need to dress and look like the act that he's managing to be effective, because he kind of just has that vibe to him of someone who is a manager, who would be invested in people just because he wants to make money. And it's just being so wasted, I feel like, at this point. I'm taking Lashley because I want to take Lashley, and I'm mad that things that you say make sense because I can see them coming together that way. That's where I'm going.
As regards MVP, I do feel he's like a modern day Ted DiBiase. He can manage lots of different people with his own unique style maintained. And I also agree that I'm not sure where Omos goes after this. I can see a brief Omos Cody feud where Cody's the underdog having to rise up to it. I can potentially see it just on Cody's route to Roman. But at the same time, I'm a little worried for Bobby Lashley at this point. I'm glad that we've got the face turn. My hope is that in the upcoming draft, he goes over to SmackDown, at which point we can build towards Bobby versus Roman. We can have Bobby versus Gunther, or Walter, as it were. Oh. I would really like that as a feud. I think that could be a lot of fun. And I think they could really reinvigorate the brand a little bit, having someone like Bobby Lashley there to help elevate the people there. Bobby Lashley versus Sheamus, I feel, could be a lot of fun. We had a brief tease of that as he was moving towards the WWE Championship, and it was a great match. I'd like to see more of it. There's good opportunities there, I feel, for Bobby Lashley on SmackDown at the moment, but on Raw, I don't know where he goes next. As much as I'd like to see Bobby Lashley versus Kevin Owens, it doesn't quite make sense to me that they would encounter themselves in that regard. It's a difficult one, and I feel if they're looking at people to move over, Bobby Lashley is the perfect candidate.
Yeah, it makes good sense. And when he gets there, you know what he would say?
What would he say?
Y'all ready to do this thing? I got to tell you, Tom, I thought about you but you were dead on about Gunther winning the Intercontinental Championship. I mean, that will happen.
Yeah.
And he's going to be fabulous in that role.
Absolutely.
The thing that I just think, it's a bit of duplicity between he and Roman if they have holding on to those championships. Not necessarily in terms of character, but being dominant and viewing almost like holding those titles hostage. Yeah. I think, but I'm very excited for that prospect. I really, really am.
It would be a perfect way to potentially build Gunther up towards a Roman Reigns or a Bobby Lashley style challenger. Just have him hold it and build it and build it. Would be good for the championship as well.
Let me ask you this. What's the ceiling for Kaiser?
That I'm not sure about. He's an incredibly talented wrestler. We haven't seen what he can do so far. And I like that he won a tag match recently. It was him that won it, which showed there's some seriousness to the character. They do believe there is talent in the guy, and they're going to be using that. I think he'll be sticking with Gunther for a large part of the future. I have seen a lot of his work in NXT UK. I can definitely see US champion in his future, Intercontinental champion in his future. I don't necessarily see world champion.
It's interesting. I think, I don't necessarily see world champion. He's got a ton of physical charisma. His body looks different than other wrestlers. I mean, we're making a big deal about how shredded he was the word I think Pat was using. And honestly, that is like when you see he's startlingly in good shape.
Yes.
But I think he would be someone, at some point, if you unmarry him from Gunther, which should be a very long time from now, you almost need to change his name and change his accent and have him go full-blown babyface to fully separate it. Because I mean, God forbid, I don't want to put this out in the universe. The problem with someone like Gunther is if they become uncommitted to that person being a heel, they become a comedy character in Vince's booking. So let's not go there. I would when and if they break up, he needs to be the babyface and be someone worth cheering. But I thought he was great last week. I thought he was really great.
Same. To briefly touch on this in a bit more depth, the face heel dynamic is difficult when you're built entirely as a foreign heel. We had USA chants when Gunther was on screen last night during SmackDown. We had USA chants from the crowd because they've decided his character is entirely defined by "I am not American."
I should chant that at you now that I think about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's an option.
USA! USA!
Well done.
USA!
Well done.
USA!
And then from a Ludwig perspective, and also I need to mention Shanky here.
Oh, gosh. That's my least favorite character.
Here's the thing. When you stop being the foreign heel, you do tend to end up as a comedy character. And when you become the character that dances, that's the first step in the end of your career.
You tell me you can't imagine a time where you're going to see Gunther shaking that.
At the moment, I can't.
No. I know that you can't. I know that you don't want to. But tell me you can't close your eyes and see a moment where he's in mid-ring.
I could do that and see that with Roman. Come on. I have an imagination. I can make up these things. I don't want to see it. I don't need to see it. I don't think he will do it. I've met the man and interviewed him on a few occasions. Gunther is very serious about his craft. Very serious. And it really shows that there is a reason he's referred to as the ring general as is. He genuinely believes in that. There is a huge amount of honor and pride that goes into everything that he does. Also briefly tried to steal my phone, but that's a whole thing.
Is this where we have to hear about you interviewing Cesaro again? Who's coming back?
I was about to move on.
And then he's going to be the model? Is that what's going to happen next week?
I was about to move on.
I'm asking you a question. We use our words here, Tom.
Okay. I've seen a report about Cesaro from Wrestling Observer's Dave Meltzer. Having read it, I do not subscribe to Wrestling Observer, so I haven't actually listened to the audio or read the newsletter. To be clear on this one, having read it from an aggregator, my understanding is that Dave Meltzer's information comes from a source in AEW who believes that Cesaro is going to WWE. Doesn't come from WWE, comes from a source in AEW. So not a first-hand source, Dave Meltzer, not a first-hand source, AEW, not a first-hand source because no link to WWE. And also, by the end of it, he makes it clear in the quote, he makes it very clear here that nothing is concrete.
Okay. So basically, it's a stream of words. But let me ask you this. Do you think there's a role for Cesaro right now in WWE?
I think there is. I think the role is first challenger to Gunther.
Well, that's interesting. That is it. I think there, I'm not missing him. Let me say that. And I really like him. That's not a dig. But the way where we were going, it's not a character that is missing. I do think WWE would be the home to return to for him. There's a growing sentiment. Now, we're going to, I guess, at the end, get into the MJF stuff going on with AEW briefly on what we know and what we followed. But there seems to be a growing sentiment of, hey, all these WWE guys debuted over there. And then what happened? Like, where are they going? What memorable situations are they in? What groundbreaking? Like, is this what they left for? And I would worry for Cesaro that he would just be another in a line of that. I don't know that at his age and just knowing his style of performance, that there is any more great moments of potentially being a world champion waiting for him in any of these promotions. Not to be mean, but I don't know that that opportunity is going to exist. But for him, I do think there's a home in WWE. I do think that there's just something visually that connects with him still being there, and stylistically, I still think there's some opportunities. I appreciate that there was a break from the disappointment of his championship run that I think he needed to, physically be removed from in order to reintroduce him back to have him rematter. And also, Tom, I don't know if you can hear, my voice is getting scratchy as this call goes on. So I appreciate you transferring intercontinentally your illness to me. Thank you.
Yeah, it's what I'm here for. I didn't mention it at the open, but my voice may be a little bit different. this time round. I have been a little bit under the weather, knocked me for 6 on Tuesday. I'm still not exactly 100%, but I'm every now and then muting to have a big cough.
Oh, stop! It's an old ball gag injury.
You weren't supposed to tell anyone about that. I told you that in confidence. Okay. I'm not bruised at all, to my knowledge.
Ask your dentist, honey.
So moving on from that, I do agree that Cesaro WWE is a more natural location for him. It fits with his character better. He's more established there. AEW for me at the moment are bloated to hell, and it's causing its own problems. I believe they'll continue to release people, as it were, but a whole lot of these MGF issues may have been down to the fact that they keep bringing people in.
Tom, can I interject here, please? Please, because you know I'm dying over here.
Go ahead.
The hypocrisy of it all. Them having a 5 effing hour long show and like, oh, they should be careful about. Are you kidding me? The same people who are outraged at the length of WrestleMania and SummerSlam, I mean, are like, yeah, but at least the quality was high. Are you kidding me? Just check the hypocrisy at the door, folks. If you don't see that this promotion is being faced with the same challenges, and that's the word that WWE has with handling expectations of their performers, expectations of their audience, and just having too many people on their roster, and the need for too much weekly content that then has them having a overly bloated roster, which then has them having way too long premium live events. I mean, come on, Tom. It's outrageous. Outrageous. That's all I'm going to say.
Completely understand. We will talk about that a little bit further at the end of the show, but I am going to bring us back towards Hell in a Cell at this point in time. The next match is for the United States Championship. The first major defense by current champion Theory. He'll be taking on Mustafa Ali. Who do you think is likely to be the winner in this one?
Well, I think it's going to be, I think Theory's leaving with the championship. So is he pinning Mustafa? Maybe. Yes, let's say that. I have a lot of heels winning in this card. Or Mustafa winning by disqualification or count out. That works too. I think this is going to be a protected reign for Theory. There is a recommitment in WWE to keeping the championships on title holders for longer. And I also think there's still a commitment to Theory as a long-term primetime player. By the way, Tom, as we're talking this through, I'm realizing how many strong contenders WWE really has at that mid-card level that are being protected for future elevation. It might feel like there's not a whole lot going on Smackdown. It might feel like there's not a whole lot going on at the mid-card of Raw. But it might be because there's not a whole lot of jarring title changes. There's not a whole lot of jarring up and down losses and all that stuff, because there's certain people who are being eyed for the future, like Madcap, like Theory. And that's all very good news, by the way. I think in this case, I'll have Mustafa winning by disqualification. Why not? But I think Theory's leaving with the championship.
We spoke earlier about people being elevated at this point in time and the fact that so many people have risen so quickly. I was talking about Omos. I never even considered Theory. Theory, of course, came onto the main roster a long time after Omos did, but his push has been so clear and so strong that he already feels like he's sort of there, if you get what I mean.
Sure. So
I feel this is a good step for him. In many ways, it kind of feels like a slight step down for Austin Theory from where he was. Just being paired with Vince McMahon has done wonders for him, no question. For me, I think Austin Theory does pick up the win. I don't think it's necessarily clean. I'm wondering whether someone may be acting on his behalf, as has done in the past. This may just be... I know Vince McMahon has been working to help elevate Austin Theory. I think this would be the perfect time for Vince McMahon to step in and on screen hold back Ali, because Ali's one of those characters that fits what people expect. With the whole backstage reports and the amount of information that's come out, true or not, we're not entirely sure with a lot of these sources, as we know in these reports. But Ali's one of those who certainly has aired his grievances before, certainly has not been happy with management. This is an ideal situation to have him held back by a a crooked GM or a very crooked boss. I think Austin Theory will win, but I don't think it will be a clean win.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We have 2 matches remaining. I'm going to start with the Raw Women's Championship match. This is the current champion Bianca Belair defending against both Becky Lynch and Asuka in a triple threat match. Asuka only recently returned. It looked like she was heading into a one-on-one with Becky Lynch, but whatever the plan was for Bianca Belair fell through, and this is the backup match that they gave us. I'm very, very happy with this backup match and quite excited to see these 3 women go absolutely mental at each other. That's just going to be great fun. Who do you have winning this one?
Well, I think you're right, Tom. I think this is going to be a spectacular match. I think it's going to be a very, very, very good match. And I think that it's not a time for a championship change. So I have Bianca, again, in a show with a lot of heel victories that I would be predicting. I think she's the right babyface for the right reasons to maintain. This opens some doors. The idea of Bianca versus Asuka in the future is fantastic. You can always revisit Bianca versus Becky, as we know that they've had, a really great match at WrestleMania. So I just think, again, continuing to build up Bianca as a champion is really where the value should be right now. It's always a concern when we're talking about the women's division of when a match is over, where do people then go? Because it seems like we've been there in all ways before. But Bianca versus Asuka, we have not really been at. And Becky is someone who can float in and out with really anybody and make it feel like it matters. But for right now, I'm sticking with Bianca. It's the right choice for right now.
Completely agree. Bianca Belair retaining. I think she'll be pinning Becky Lynch, largely due to Becky Lynch being distracted by the intensity of her hatred for Asuka. Nothing particularly groundbreaking there, but I think the match is going to be absolutely fantastic, and I would be a lot less excited for the show if this match wasn't on it. This is probably going to be the rewatch match, if you ask me, the match that you come back to that makes you want to watch this pay-per-view again, as far as I'm sitting on there. That takes us to the likely main event, which is the Hell in a Cell match, 3rd in a row, Cody Rhodes versus Seth Rollins. Cody Rhodes picked up the win at WrestleMania. He picked up the win at WrestleMania Backlash in an inconclusive manner, holding the tights via the roll-up. Seth Rollins had the chance to go hardcore, let's say, and go at it with the Hell in a Cell. This is a man who has proven pedigree with the Cell, and I'm very interested to see what Cody can do in that environment. But hey, this man knows his blood and guts. Let's just say that. These two should put on a great match, hopefully very high quality. I see Cody Rhodes walking away the winner. I'm confident the entire feud has just been a re-establishment of Cody Rhodes. And once again, all roads lead to Reigns.
So I do not have that ending, Tom.
Okay.
What's it been? 25 years since the first Hell in a Cell? 1997. 25 years.
Yeah, 25.
Almost, but just under when it was October. I liked the way that first match ended.
Okay.
Okay, with Kane coming in and whatnot. So I picture it. Okay. Cody and Seth have what I think is going to be one of the more dangerous Hell in a Cell matches, knowing who we're at. We're going right now in May. I put it out there that I hope that they take care of themselves and don't do anything stupid in this situation. But they both have a lot to prove. Seth, in terms of maintaining his spot and really having everybody just come to terms with the fact that he is, next to Roman, aside from Roman, he is the top of WWE, despite years of bad booking. He is there, still needs to be protected. He's absorbed losses. Like he still needs to leave this again. So the point I've been making throughout the show, still looking strong. But picture it, Tom. Cody has Seth done. They're all, if they're bloody or not, if they're exhausted, they're sweat, everything. Cody is about to pin him. The lights go out. Wouldn't this be a tremendous spot for Judgment Day for Edge to appear in the ring and have that be the transition to be Cody's next opponent and next feud? Have Edge cost Cody the match. Seth rolls out in the Shawn Michaels. You can still picture that visual of Shawn Michaels from that first Hell in a Cell, completely sweaty and bloody, hanging on Hunter in China, I think with Rick Rude in the background, being dragged out. He's done. They've moved on. And then Undertaker had Kane in the future. That's what I am predicting would be a fantastic ending to this show. And then it's Edge versus Cody, a feud that still matters, I think would still be strong for all involved, and that's what I want.
I like that idea. That sounds like a very good... No, I like that idea. It sounds like a very good way to finish Hell in a Cell. And honestly, I'm excited by the concept of Cody versus Edge. So I do feel Cody will need some backup in order to get there. So I'm interested to see how that might play out. I don't necessarily see it myself, but I do like the idea, and I think they should do something like that. That could be a lot of fun. We are getting towards a level, though, where Edge becomes sort of Bray Wyatt, just in the way that he would appear at the end of shows and be like, you, forget all this, I want to wrestle you.
Right. Well, here's the thing, though. There's still a delicate balance you need to strike with Cody in terms of, still continuing with character development and not assuming that people, I know they've been doing this and people do know him now more than they did before. There's still more work to do.
Yeah.
And again, you have to always be careful not to make someone always feel like they're on scholarship. And, it's like Seth Rollins may be a pain in the ass that people want to see lose, but he's still our pain in the ass that we don't always want to see lose. Because in order for him to be like snivelly, and just swarmy and all that kind of stuff, he has to steal wins, and he has to win cheaply, and his wins still count too, which is why I think this is an opportunity for him to conclude this. He wouldn't be winning the feud. He'd be winning this fight as things transition away. And I think that's the way to go for this one.
It would certainly be the Seth Rollins way to win. And certainly it didn't do that much damage to Shawn Michaels way back when, despite the fact he barely got any offense in against The Undertaker in that Hell in a Cell. But The Undertaker was a very, very special character at that point in time. That is our Hell in a Cell predictions. There are a couple of things we still want to talk about. MJF, we mentioned earlier. I want to quickly recap the situation here. Before Double or Nothing, MJF no-showed a meet and greet. He wasn't there. It wasn't previously announced, and AEW, to my knowledge, are now issuing refunds for the event. Shortly afterwards, reports started coming out from Fightful, stating that a plane had been booked to take MJF away, basically just take him home. MJF had booked a plane out of there and would likely not be making Double or Nothing. Now, this was back and forth for a while as information did come in. Eventually, it was reported that, okay, he's still there. The plane hasn't been used. He hasn't gone and flown off. Now, Brian Alvarez of Wrestling Observer stepped in at this point with his belief that he's not sure a plane was ever booked and that this may be a work. There has been an interesting myriad of reports since. One thing I find incredible is that Fightful have been very open about the fact that the information they've been given has come direct from MJF. They have named their source in some of the information that they've been sharing. Meanwhile, Wrestling Observer, it's been a bit of a head-to-head, to be honest. One site clearly believing that it's a work, one site clearly believing that it's a shoot. From where I'm sitting, I certainly believe the no-show was unintentional, wasn't originally planned, but from there an agreement has clearly been reached in order to allow MJF the mic time that he had on Dynamite to basically say whatever he likes and call out the promoter in charge, as it were. Now, reports from our boss, Wade Keller, have been very clear on the subject about MJF's issues, the cause of the issues, and the fact that a lot of people have come into the company and are earning more than MJF already, which has caused an urge from MJF to speak to Tony Khan, or at least have Tony Khan reach out to him and get a raise to elevate him to a position similar to where he is on the card in the finances. Now, Nick, that's the information as we have it. What's your take on this?
Well, this is 2 weeks in a row now where we're talking about disgruntled people who are taking their careers in their own hands. Now, Tom, one thing, life is not only just about timing, it's about choices. And everybody has choices to make in terms of what they're willing to put up with as employees or independent contractors, if you would so have it. I think I'm not happy with a lot of these choices in this, what you've just outlined here. Now, here's why. There always has to be a better way than you letting down people. And I don't know how you reward someone with the screen time and the promo time that MJF got this week, and clearly the elevation of positioning after you no-showed a signing. I mean, listen, is that the cardinal sin? Well, no, I don't know. Maybe not. But it's not right. And at some point, like I said to you earlier, the tug and pull that Tony Khan is going to and is now probably currently experiencing of actually having to run a promotion and having to deal with ego and deal with people being disappointed and unhappy and all of those things. It makes the game, the fun of AEW from the past couple of years, come a little bit more into reality of why someone like Vince McMahon has had to make the decisions that he made along the way. This is screaming to me very much of poor decisions that WCW made back in the day, where you were dealing with a bloated roster with people who, were really frustrated with the door being opened to main event talent from the opposition coming in and having that clearly be prioritized. And really just creating a dynamic where then you're coming from behind trying to keep people happy. And honestly, I don't know how anyone can be happy about this. Okay, so you get the big shoot a promo. I got a text from someone, during it, like, oh, do you think he's going to WWE? I was sad for it all. Like, what are we going to try to recreate the Brian Pillman story from 1995? Like, is that really where we're going with MJF right now? Is he going to be the firebrand that you never know what he's going to do? Here's the other thing of it all. I don't know whether it's a shoot. I don't know whether it's or not it's a work. Tony Khan seems to be really enjoying the presence of himself, whether physically being on screen, like he appeared when he brought out Martha Hart, or his name being used as it was during the MJF promo. I think this is hints that there is trouble in the water over there. I really do. I think that this is not good news over there. If you want the promotion that you were all excited to have, which was not egocentric, based on the promoter, that if it wasn't, filled with politics and all of that kind of stuff and bad behavior, that's what you were excited about when AEW was created. And now it's showing signs of the bloated card, which again, we referenced earlier, and just, I think, bad habits that are just absolutely peering its way through. So I don't think this is good news for anybody. As I said, it is about choices, and they're all choosing to go down a particular lane with this where MJF has been rewarded. I don't know. Let's say it's a shoot. Again, how you reward that. But let's say it's a work. You would work people into being disappointed at a signing like that. That's the way you chose to go about it. I mean, that's pretty low rent, if you ask me. But I think AEW is low rent.
Okay.
Am I wrong?
I personally disagree as regards AEW as a whole, but I think there are elements to it that they've not finished learning. And I think it'll be a long time before they do. I don't think anyone ever does finish learning, but I think there is a lot of experience about how to run a wrestling promotion. There is not a lot of experience about how to run the business side of the wrestling promotion. I know that there's a lot of experience in the Khan family, but Tony Khan himself, not so much. And I feel he's a bit too involved in some things and not involved enough in other things. I think there's a balance act he's still working out. And I think that's okay.
Yeah. How many world champions are going to be over there, Tom?
What do you mean?
There's going to be 2 world champions.
Oh,
2?
Okay.
Isn't that what we were? But people were furious at WWE for having 2 world champions, right?
I can't recall. I wasn't watching when we first went to 2 world champions.
That's fair.
Yeah. When we first went to 2 world champions and Triple H was handed a championship, I was not watching and I was okay with it. But yeah, at the moment we're looking like we're going to get an interim champion, which of course, Punk being out of action and still holding a championship is something that happened last in 2011 after he won the WWE championship at Money in the Bank and left with it. And then John Cena won the championship, but then they had to have a match anyway. So CM Punk, if you're not sure what we're talking about, announced on Rampage last night that he is currently carrying an injury and will not be able to defend his championship. The championship has not been taken away from him. It's not been vacated. There will instead be an interim champion until he's ready to face off against that interim champion, and we all go back to basically where we were to start with. I don't know if this will count as an actual AEW championship run for whoever wins the interim championship. I'm not angry that there's a tournament planned. That's going to be quite fun. But outside of that, this unfortunately will have been made up as it goes along because it's an injury, you can't control that. But it also kind of screams made up as it goes along.
Yeah, it does. It's not. I don't think it's good. I think a tournament's always fun to watch, but I don't. Again, when you're saying I don't know if this is an official championship title reign, like what? Like how? This is like the championship scramble in WWE. That match, like this is dumb. This is very, very dumb. This is dumb stuff. I think that's ridiculous. What are you ripping over there? I keep hearing ripping. What are you ripping?
Sorry, I have an OCD habit to rip up paper.
Oh, well, at least we know. I didn't know what documents were being destroyed on my, if I was going to be called to be subpoenaed, or did you witness Tom ripping things up?
I didn't realize you could hear that. I've been doing it every day since we started doing this.
Oh, no, today it's like basically like you're sitting on my lap ripping something.
I do apologize. I will stop. Yeah, so the CM Punk situation, AEW are very protective of their top championship. So if there's going to be an interim champion, I don't believe they will appear in the history books. I think this will still be celebrated. If a year from now CM Punk is returned and he's defended his championship, say 2 or 3 times, they will say, oh, he's been a year-long champion. So it's debatable how to present that, but I don't see AEW changing the way that they do things.
So let me throw a scenario to you. Let me just throw this scenario to you. CM Punk, you're CM Punk, and it's 2014. Brock Lesnar comes back and wins the championship. Then he injures his foot. He's not going to be able to be around. But WWE doesn't take the championship from him. They do a tournament, but you're not sure if that championship is going to count or not. And CM Punk is maybe that person. But Brock gets to come back in a year and been a year-long champion with only working 2 days. How do you feel?
Not great.
You really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that one coming, but not great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm saying. That's all.
We are going to wrap it up there. Say a big thank you to everyone who has joined us today. And we'll be back next week with more information about Raw, SmackDown, Hell in a Cell, and maybe a little bit more AEW. There's been a bit of AEW stuff slipping in more and more recently as they've gotten closer to the big news, challenging the big boys and so on and so forth. It's honestly a pretty good sign from where I'm sitting that they're doing so much that's newsworthy at the moment. It sort of does put them on a more even keel, but not quite even enough from where I'm sitting. So you can find me, if you'd like to know more, on Twitter at Colohue, that is Colohue. And you can also find me on YouTube and Twitch, under Tom Colohue, TomColohue. We have spoiler warning shows on Mondays and Fridays where we talk about the latest in wrestling news there. Nick, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Nicholas Barbati, NicholasBarbati, and occasionally on the Tom Colohue Show.
Yes, occasionally on the Tom Colohue Show. Thank you as always for that one. Until then, thank you everyone for joining us. We've been Nick and Tom's Intercontinental Adventure on the PWTorch VIP network. Thank you and goodbye.
Y'all ready to end this thing?